Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dirty Martini. I hope you're doing well and I hope you're having an amazing day. In today's episode, I'm trying out something new and something I'm actually very excited about personally. I really hope I don't bore you, but if I do, at least I'm entertaining myself. The idea actually occurred to me very randomly. Well, not so randomly, considering that I have been thinking about this in my personal life for so long, but never did it occur to me to talk about it on the podcast. And I think it is a great topic of discussion, but I'm a little bit biased. But let me stop edging you and actually finally introduce what I'm talking about. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about something that I find very important and something which I feel like affects a big chunk of humanity. And in particular, I want to talk about social media or media in general, but like with a more focus on social media. I have actually decided that I will do a series with episodes popping every now and then where we discuss social media platforms, social media addiction, smartphones, TV, the internet, and overall their importance in our life, as well as their effect on us as individuals and as a society. But before we get into the factually correct and the actually relevant things, let me blabber for a second. I think we're all by this point used to me talking 10 minutes about something that could be said in 2 sentences, and you best believe what I'm about to say is no exception. I personally am addicted to social media, and in particular, I'm addicted to Instagram, and I have been struggling a lot with fighting that addiction. Because the way I fight it is by going cold turkey and deleting my Instagram. And then when I get it back, eventually, my relationship to it hasn't improved a single bit. But let's leave this topic for another episode because all the themes I want to touch upon are so broad that we need to go into detail to gain a better understanding. I want to build this series block by block so that everything becomes clear. The problem is that everything is so tightly interwoven that it is a bit hard to explain one concept without going into another. But if that is the case, I will very briefly mention it and then try to keep my focus on the one to which the episode is dedicated. So I think that doing a deep dive into social media, the academia surrounding it, and my personal relationship with it will be an interesting case study. Maybe it will help some of you who are probably going through the same thing. And if not, at least it will help me paint a bigger picture on my personal situation and understand my behaviors better. And by doing so, I can create a pattern on how to hopefully change them because I'm not happy with them, but I still do them. And that's on that. See, that is the biggest punch in the face I had to go through throughout my entire bachelor. I spent 3 years extensively studying what I'm about to say, so seeing the psychology behind my actions and feeling helpless when it came to changing them was a really disheartening reality to live in. Because I had all the steps and I had all the necessary knowledge and all the necessary theory, but the story ended there. Theory didn't help me with anything in practicality. It only made me overthink more or at least become self-aware. And as an avid overthinker, self-awareness is my strongest suit and my biggest enemy. But this time, I want to try and apply theory. I want to try and unpack theory, and not just for an essay or a presentation. I want to do it for my own well-being. Because if I didn't learn anything world-changing in those 3 years, I might as well try to make it life-changing on a very personal level. Or at least I will revise my lessons as I'm about to enter an entirely new field of academia. And it would be nice to have things documented somewhere and not make those 3 years go to waste. Also, people always kept on asking me, what is it that I exactly study? When I told them that media studies is not journalism, people were confused. And I was also confused. So when people ask me in the future, I would just refer them to this series to be able to understand what I mean. Because media studies is not journalism. And again, don't worry, I was fooled too when I was applying. I was fooled into thinking that it will be journalism, which is why I wanted to drop out when I found out that it's not. But I only came to my senses in year 2, and it was a 3-year bachelor, and I was like, let's just pull through. But that is a topic for another time. Basically, I was fooled into thinking that because of my university's page, which provided absolutely false information, but let's not get right into it now. I don't want to be sued. I don't want to have any trouble because I'm still sticking to that university because I never learned, and I give people more than enough chances to prove me wrong every single time. So yeah, before I proceed, if you haven't recalled by what I just said right now, let me make this clear. Before someone tries to discredit what I have to say, let me just quickly remind you that I have a bachelor's degree in media studies. And please don't think that I'm cocky when I say that I would expect to know what I'm talking about. I'm going to share with you my knowledge as a media scholar because I am qualified to be a media scholar. So at least I get to finally put my degree into action. And also, in this series, I will introduce my personal experience and my personal opinions, which somewhat conform to and somewhat contradict academia. I am in no way claiming to be professional when I say that I'm qualified to be a media scholar, that I am a media scholar. So I'm not trying to be cocky. I'm not trying to be entitled. I'm not claiming to be a professional. And I'm in no way claiming, by the way, to be a doctor. So if you take any of my advice, don't. Or if you do it at your own risk. Basically, I have a pretty solid base of knowledge about the topics that I want to talk about. But of course, academia is in no way justification, or it's not an excuse, to be more precise. I just think that having invested so much time and effort into the things I want to introduce to you as concepts, I can be given, if not a green, at least a beige flag to continue. Of course, let me also remind you that academia is not always reflective of real life scenarios, especially if the conclusions it reaches have been drawn in laboratory circumstances. And also, let's not forget that the media we face today, the media that we use nowadays, even though it derives from the media those theories and concepts were developed about, so it is far more advanced nowadays, and it is changing at a rapid pace. So if you find this episode and you hear it 3 years from now, and none of what I'm about to say applies anymore, then that's fine. I think that is what's so fascinating about the field, that it is in constant motion. And the things I study now, yes, they may not be applicable tomorrow, but that shouldn't make my knowledge obsolete. I think the knowledge just develops. It doesn't go through a revolution, it goes through an evolution. Anyways, I am yapping too much about stuff without actually saying anything significant. I just felt the need to give those little disclaimers so that nobody comes for me, because I am a fragile being. Don't come for me. Don't try to cancel me. If I make mistakes, that's fine. And now, to wrap up the yapping portion of this episode, I think it is best to finally introduce the mental breakdown I'm going through and simply give you a tasty but short trauma dumping session. The reason I'm recording this episode now is because I just spent disgustingly long time scrolling on TikTok because I kept on pressing the remind me in 15 minutes button after I spent the 30 minutes I have allowed myself on Instagram per day. And after I don't know which time pressing that button, I felt extremely guilty, which is when I turned to TikTok. And I really wish I could go back in time and not create my TikTok because I didn't have my TikTok for such a long time. I didn't have it for 4 years. I deleted it in 2020 because 2020, I think we all remember, was a bit of an iffy year. And I deleted it because I was like, that is what's best for my mental health, which is not at its best right now. So let's not make things worse. And this year I was like, okay, I will use TikTok for marketing purposes. I will use it to advertise my podcast. And then I re-established my account. And I haven't been using it for marketing purposes like I initially did. But now I don't. Now I just use it for my personal use. And it is taking over my life. And I hate it. And I wish I could go back to March when I created the podcast and just not download the app again because it is taking over my life. I hate it. And yeah, I cannot go back in time. I cannot get back all the time I invested in this app. I cannot get back the time I wasted on this app. But at least I can try and change my behavior and usage for the future and not waste my life scrolling on TikTok. And as much as I enjoy TikTok because the algorithm works fast, I think TikTok has one of the best working algorithms and one of the most efficient algorithms. So I personally don't see an app on my phone that is making me feel worse in my life right now than TikTok. The reason is, and it is as much my fault as it is their business model. So the reason is because I feel like I'm scrolling my life away. And I am in this hole, in this TikTok pit. And I don't know how to get out. Also, I don't have the opportunity to go out right now and touch grass because it is the middle of the night and there is a bear in my village. Very Balkan core, I know. So I thought, since I cannot go out and make myself feel better, I can at least talk to someone about what I'm going through. Yeah, and my personal experience with social media addiction, I want to explore further and I want to share with you because I feel like it is an important topic. I feel like it is a topic that is going to become even more prevalent. And I feel like social media and their addictive nature are a topic that should be talked about more, considering how predominant they are in our culture. Also, I feel like I'm the only person in my circle who is going through this, or at least I'm the only one who has been upfront enough, honest enough in front of themselves to admit that they have a problem and is willing to talk about it. But that means that I have nobody to talk about this. I don't have anybody to talk about to someone who's willing or is able to understand. So I just want to share this with you and hopefully someone understands me because I have tried to talk to people about my phone and social media addiction and they, to put it lightly, undermine it. I have had people tell me that this is not a real addiction, that they don't understand how it can be true, how it can develop, that I should just turn off my phone and so on and so forth. And disconnecting sounds so much easier said than done because it is literally in the palm of my hand. I can press the button. but I cannot. Trust me, social media addiction is a real and a very serious problem, and it affects thousands, if not millions of people, whether they're aware of it or not. And I feel like we should talk about it openly to figure out how to battle it. Now, even though I don't have the statistics in front of me, I can assume that it is not just my generation that has social media addicts, because social media are not developed just to cater to Gen Z, which is what is so fascinating about them. I feel like multiple generations, older and younger, are heavily affected. And dare I even say this has the potential to turn into a pandemic? Or has it maybe already turned into a pandemic that we refuse to acknowledge? Which is why we should talk about it. Social media are omnipresent, and unless the internet somehow perishes, I don't see them going away anytime soon, because they are extremely lucrative, namely because of their addictive nature. Because the more time you spend on there, and time and attention are their business models, so the more time and attention you spend on them, the more time and attention you devote to them, the more money you make them. And the more money you make them, the more they know how to capture your time and attention better until you live and breathe social media. And I'm by no means trying to instill panic in any one of you. Yes, my thoughts and opinions may sound dystopian and radical to some of you. I recognize this. But I think we should take them into considerations when opening up the floor to have these important discussions. And we must have these important discussions because phones and social media are here to stay. And while we make use of them in our life, we shouldn't let them become our life. But let's take a step back and let's take it step by step. And with this, I say let's finally get to the talking about social media, because my addiction is something I want to talk to you about, but for all of us to be able to understand it nicely, I need to start from the beginning. So in this very first episode, I think it is only fitting to start off with the why. If you're familiar with the creation of business plans, then you maybe know that there are certain questions you need to answer to. Like, what are you creating? How are you creating it? When? Where? For whom? And why are you creating it? And I'm not sure, so don't quote me on this, but I think it was Apple who, as a company, started off their business plan with the why. Because a lot of companies start with the what. Because figuring out why you do what you do is sometimes, if not most of the times, more important than the thing you are doing. So the why is oftentimes more important than the what. So what do I mean by starting off with the why? Well, to be able to unpack the influence and importance of all sorts of media, I think we need to first understand why is it that we need? Why is it that we use the media that we use? And to explain this, I'm going to use a particular theory that is very prominent. Now, of course, there are other theories that build on this one, but since this is a foundational one, I think it only makes sense to start off with it. In media scholarship, there is this theory called uses and gratifications. It was developed by Bloomer and Katz, and that theory was developed with the idea to categorize the different reasons why people use a particular medium and what they achieve from that usage. Now, before I walk you through this categorization, I think it is important to point out a few things about this theory. It builds on work that was carried out in the 1940s, but the theory itself was developed back in 1974. So as you can tell, long time before the first iPhone, let alone Instagram, let alone TikTok and any of the sort. And while this is an old theory in the field of media, which is a relatively young academic field, it is still applicable to modern media today because it has established a broader scheme of why we use certain media. The bigger problem of the theory, however, doesn't have much to do with the date of its origin. What is a bit disputable about this theory is its very nature. And by this, I want to emphasize the perception it has of who the media user is. The uses and gratifications theory assumes that the user is active. Now, what does it mean to be an active user? Well, that means that you do not just passively receive information, but you respond to it, you seek it, you interact with it. It is a two-way street instead of just the media affecting you. You affect it as well. And while maybe the active nature of the media user seems like a given when we talk about a social media platform, there is a small problem. Because even though according to the uses and gratifications theory, the user is active, that may actually not always be the full picture. Now, how come, you may ask? Well, it is very simple. Being active suggests being incentivized, being conscious, being reasoned. What I mean by this, when I talk about the uses and gratifications theory, is that it assumes that there is always a reason behind our media usage, including what platform we choose to use and what platform we choose not to use, where we choose to use it and where not to, and when we use it and when we turn it off, if ever. But the phenomenon of constant connectivity is an entire episode of its own, so let's not get into it and its consequences right now. But the thing is that the uses and gratifications theory equates your activity as a media user to your awareness. And while the user may be an active media user, they are not always an aware media user. So basically, the theory suggests that you are always intentional with your media usage. And that is a bit controversial because, again, we are active users. Many studies have been done on this. We are not just passive recipients of information. Whether we are aware of it or not, we are active recipients of that information because we can conform to it, we can challenge it, we can whatever. Now, I'm not saying, again, that the media user is passive by no means, because being aware and being active is not the same. If I were ever to make a statement that the audience is passive, I fear I will make Stuart Hall rise from the dead. And if I ever claim an audience member to be a passive recipient of information, just know that I have been held hostage and you need to release me. This is the sign that should indicate that something is not okay, that it's maybe not me, that I've been cloned. Basically, the academic understanding of audiences has undergone significant changes since it was first developed. And the most revolutionary or evolutionary, however you choose to perceive it. So that shift happened when theories were developed to disprove the fact that the audiences are mere passive recipients of information. If you're more interested in the chronology of audience reception and perception theories, look up Laswell's communication model, the hypodermic needle theory, the propaganda theory, and then compare them to Stuart Hall's reception theory, which is what I mentioned, that you can conform or you can reject the information you receive. Or if you're interested in those and would like to learn more about them from me, leave me a comment and I would gladly go into detail about them. Let's make those 3 years I spent learning all this worth it at least. But let's leave last one and hold to the side for now. And let's go back to Bloomer and Katz. So the uses and gratifications theory assumes that the user always has a motive behind their media usage. And by doing so, it assumes that the user is not only motivated in their media usage, but is aware of their motivation. And as such, has control over it. Which raises questions and concerns. Because I'm sure most of you will probably relate to the example of grabbing your phone out of habit and not looking to satisfy a particular need you have in that moment, or make a particular use out of it. You just do it sometimes unaware of the why you are doing it, if there even is a proper why behind it. Which raises further questions about the nature of habits. Are habits consciously performed choices and actions, or are they fully performed with lack of self-awareness, or are they something in between? All interesting stuff, or at least I think so. So what I'm trying to say is that the uses and gratifications theory that I'm about to explain to you right now is by no means impeccable. It aids the understanding of certain things, but does not suffice in the theorization of the absolutely full picture. Because creating an absolutely full picture is a bit difficult when your field is changing so rapidly. Still, I have decided to talk about this theory in particular today because I feel like it is a good starting point to understanding why is it that we use the media that we use. Again, it is a foundational theory which has aided the development of further studies. And how can we understand and appreciate the development of the new if we cannot relate it or compare it to the past to see how far we have come as scholars and beyond? So, Uses and Gratifications by Bloomer and Katz, 1974. What was it all about? Well, it was established with the intent to explain why people use certain media and what they get out of that usage. So, what need do they fulfill, or what gratification do they get out of their media usage? Or in other words, what wants and what needs do people satisfy through the media they use? And to answer the why of media usage, the theorists established 4 broad categories of different, some distinct, some somewhat related motivations, which would drive a person to use a medium. Those reasons, those 4 broad reasons, were in particular diversion, personal relationships, personal identity, and surveillance. Let's go through each one of them. So let's get started with diversion. What they included under diversion was seeking entertainment and escapism. I think that's how you pronounce it. And as you can probably suggest, or maybe even know from personal experience, this can be tightly related to boredom, for instance. Of course, it is not solely boredom driven, but I think this is a good example to lean on. So when we are bored, we look for something that will spike our interest, something that will capture our attention, or simply something to make the time pass. And the media, social media in particular here, because of their portability and being so ubiquitous and so easily attainable, are oftentimes our go-to as a form of entertainment. Just think about it for a second. When you're, for instance, waiting somewhere, let's say in front of the doctor's office, and there are many people in front of you, and you wait will be no less than 15 minutes. What do? I do not mean to assume, but I would imagine that a lot of you, me included, would pull out our phones and go on any sort of social media and scroll and interact or whatever. That is a way to make the time pass. Although, even without the social media, the time will pass as well. But the thing is, however, that we feel like time passes differently. It passes differently when you're bored, and it passes differently when you're occupied with something. And I'm sure that many of you relate to this idea that just time passes with a different speed when you're occupied and having fun, instead of just sitting and waiting and staring at the wall. It is like boredom almost equals eternity. So social media we can use to escape boredom, not just in front of the doctor's office, but also in our own homes when we, for example, watch a show or a movie or play a game. Which brings me to the next idea that is related to diversion. The idea is that people use the media as a sort of tension relieving tool. And through its complexity and its plethora of stimuli, the media allows the relief of mental and physical and emotional tension, which is a pretty big deal. And that is closely related to escapism, not just entertainment. So sometimes, as people, we get overwhelmed with our physical reality. There are too many things going on, too many things to be done, too many things depending on us. And we feel under pressure. We feel stressed and just not okay. And when, or even before the last drop falls, we would oftentimes look for something to distract us from our reality so that we can decompress when things get too heavy. And I'll give you an example from my recent day-to-day. When I was writing my thesis, at times I was too stressed and extremely overwhelmed. I was having a writer's block and I was just wanting things to stop for a second so that I can take a breath. And what I would do is I would open Netflix and play a sitcom. And this relates to the entertainment because I'm looking for something to bring me joy, but also it is a form of escapism because media products can be so subtly curated that they quite literally establish an entire universe of their own and submerge us in it every time we interact with it. And by watching the sitcoms, I would take my mind off my thesis for the duration of the episode, or let's be real, the episodes, depending on how many I would watch. And I would just inhabit the fictional world of the series. And after I had had my break from my own real world and my own reality, I would then go back to them. So, in other words, the media can be used as a form to distract ourselves, to entertain ourselves, to decompress, to relieve all sorts of tension, and simply switch off our existence from the physical world we occupy. And if you want me to give you an example of a media form that encapsulates these needs clearly, just think about virtual reality and all the virtual reality glasses or goggles or whatever, and how not only do they let you explore another reality, which relates to the notion of entertainment, but also how we purposefully seek to desensitize ourselves to our physical reality by putting on the equipment which will submerge our senses in the virtual world that we are exploring. So that is both entertainment and escapism all in one. That is diversion. Another reason people use social media, according to the uses and gratifications theory, has something to do with our personal relationships. Social media can be used as a tool to discover, build, develop, and nourish interpersonal relationships. And I think this is one of the more, if not the most obvious one of all the ones we have in the list. Because the entire point of social media is that it is social. It is meant to be used as a device to socialize, as a device to establish communication, and in a very efficient manner nonetheless. Just think about all the instant messaging options we have and the ever-developing tools and features that are added constantly to social media platforms to add yet another form of communication with your followers. Be it to post a picture, add a story, add a note, or even add a song to your bio. And this can also bring the question of what is it that we qualify as social media? Because immediately, I guess most of us will start listing platforms like Instagram, WhatsApp, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, or X. I'm sorry. No, I'm not. No, wait. Am I dead naming X? I apologize. Let's move on with my point. So we would most likely immediately list platforms like these when we're asked to name a platform which helps us with the establishment and nourishment of personal relationships. But I'm just now thinking, what about apps, for example, like Revolut? I don't know if it is a globally, if it's a global app or just in Europe, but it is a banking app. It is a purely online bank. But there you can text people apart from just sending them money. So is it just another affordance that the app offers? Or can Revolut in that sense also be classified as a social media app? All stunning questions, I know, because they really make you think in detail about what is it exactly that the apps you dedicate your time to do. What is their purpose? What is their nature? What is their goal? And just so on and so forth. But let's circle back to the personal relationship which those apps facilitate. What I think is even more interesting about the social media personal relationships is that they're not limited to your immediate circle. You can talk to friends of friends of friends, or you can even talk to strangers. You don't have to have met the person in person to talk to them. So, in that manner, the digital relationships we establish online are global. What I find fascinating is that there are so many aspects of the mediated personal relationships. Because they can be digitalized offline relationships, they can be purely digital, and they can start off as a digital relationship that also transcends the online realm and manifests itself as a relationship in the offline physical world as well. Talk about global village. Shout out McLuhan. And what is even more fascinating is that each one of these types comes with a specific social norm, a specific set of rules of how that relationship is to be played out. What is even more, personal relationships online can be anonymous, they can be behind a character, they can be focused on a very particular topic, or they can be broad, they can be one-on-one, and they can be one to many, or they can be many to many. Again, global village. So social media offers a way to establish global communities with efficiency, with speed, and up-to-dateness that has never been seen before. We use it to communicate with others and establish interpersonal relationships. But what is more, we can also utilize it to establish ourselves in the digital and also in the offline realms of existence. Which brings me to my next point. And that is the fact that people use media to establish a sense of personal identity. And here, not only do I mean the concept of using a particular social media in a particular way to curate your own image online and offline, like having a feed on Instagram that is particular colors. Although that is a big factor and a very interesting factor, which indicates self-perception of a particular sort. Because the way we see ourselves and the things we deem valuable are to be noticed in our social media consumption. And for that, especially for the latter, we have algorithms to thank, because they're complex codes which curate our social media presence to our own likes and preferences. And when it comes to us curating our own image, and by doing so to establish a sense of personal identity, then that is a very interesting topic in itself that maybe we can explore in some of the future episodes of the series. And while this aspect of personal identity is by no means to be overlooked, what the uses and gratifications theory means when it talks about personal identity has more to do with the concept of relatability, or even more about integration. So let me explain this with an example. You have a certain perception of yourself, and you want the reassurance that your self-perception, your self-identity is socially acceptable, and what is more, is credible. And the reason you want this reassurance is because no matter how independent we all are, and trust me, it pains me to admit this because independence is my second name, or what I'm trying to become my second name. So no matter our independence, we are social beings by nature. And whether we like it or not, we are a part of a community, one way or another. Most of the times, we are members of a plethora of communities. And us holding the standard of that community high, consciously or subconsciously, and wanting to be associated with it, consciously or subconsciously, and having the reassurance that what we do and who we are is acceptable in that community's realm, gives us self-esteem, consciously or subconsciously. And what is more, it gives us a feeling of belonging. And if the things you do, the things you consume, the person you are, does not align with who you want to be, you can utilize the media to change yourself. For example, you can start watching a particular show to make yourself relatable. You can buy products from an ad you see online to make yourself attached to the community which praises that product, and so on and so forth. Basically, we can use the media to curate our own lifestyle and our own choices to establish a sense of the self, to integrate better, to attach certain qualities of the media to us, and use them to become relatable, likable, and a part of something that's bigger than us. But to do that, we need to have sufficient knowledge about the meaning of the media we use. Which brings me to the last use we make out of the media we choose. And that is particularly surveillance. And no, I do not mean cyber stalking. To make it more clear, what is meant by surveillance is the opportunity to get knowledge and educate ourselves about what surrounds us through the use of media. And nowadays, with a significantly big chunk of the global information being digitalized and widely available to the public, we can afford to educate ourselves on a plethora of topics. Topics which, had the internet not existed, we wouldn't have even heard of. And we can educate ourselves academically, socially, culturally, emotionally, spiritually. We can do that with the use of the internet. And what I find super fascinating is the immediacy we have when it comes to looking for information. And I'm not talking only about its attainability and the efficiency of Googling something, which is also mind-blowing when you think about it, but I'm also talking about the up-to-dateness of the information. Nowadays, we get live updates on situations. I remember when I was little, and I wasn't little that long ago, even though I'm convinced that I'm an old lady, but like I wasn't a child that long ago. And I remember I didn't have a smartphone and we didn't have a computer, and my grandparents would just buy newspapers. And they do still buy newspapers, by the way. But the thing is, newspapers, as much as they're a traditional form of media and a groundbreaking one as such, they cannot compete with the online world, because for a newspaper article to be written, for it to be edited and published, it takes a lot more time and a lot more effort than, for example, someone just pressing a go live button on their social media and broadcasting the event as it happens. Which is why you can rely more on those established news outlets, because you know a lot of labor goes into the production of a single article. That is why, okay, little trauma dumping. I only found out that my gymnastics coach had been unalived a few days after the unaliving had taken place, because it took the press time to gather all the information, write it up, and publish it. Nowadays, with social media, we get immediacy. We may not get a thoroughly researched picture, but we get an immediate picture. And that just makes me think now, if the two are always to be separated, or if they can eventually go hand in hand. So this raises questions about the future of such media and the sort. But let's not get there right now. The important thing is that now we have access to an overwhelming amount of data. We have access to a constant stream of information that is updated live and is widely available. So I just think personally that this is all too fascinating. 10-minute version, Martina's version from the vault. We can be anywhere, anytime, just through our screens. And we can update our knowledge constantly. The problem is maybe that we have too many channels of information and not all of them are trustworthy. Because what is stopping me right now to go online and make up lies about someone or something and present them as factual? I know, I joke a lot that if we see something online, it must be true. But let's keep it real for a second. Not everything, not most of the stuff we see online are factual. And they're not even sufficiently researched. They're just reported. Which is why media literacy is so important. So that we know how to approach the online world, because it is very tightly intertwined with our physical offline world. And I think I will leave you with this thought about media literacy as an urge for everybody to look more into it, to get educated, because we have the means to. To sum it up, we use social media and media in general to fulfill a plethora of uses. And while there are many that I did not list right now, they can all generally fall under the umbrella that Bloomer and Katz developed. Because let's not forget that one, it is built as a structure, as the core structure of understanding the why. It does not paint a full picture of the why. And as new media develop, as new channels develop, as new platforms develop, new and new needs and wants are being met, And what is even more, new needs and wants are being created. But until we understand the fuller picture, I think we can rely a little bit on Bloomer and Katz as a starting point. And their starting point is all about that we use the media to gratify our social and personal needs, be it identification, be it relatability, relationships, knowledge, entertainment, escapism, and so on and so forth. Well, guys, this is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found it entertaining or at least a bit educational. Media usage. I hope it made you reflect on why is it that you use the media that you use. And hopefully I answered some unasked questions and gave you a bit of unwanted clarity. If you have any questions, by all means, feel free to reach out to me here in the comments, because now Spotify allows you to leave comments down below, or you can reach me on Instagram at Dirty Martini Pod. I'm very excited to nerd out with you here and there every now and then, but until then, stay hydrated, wear sunscreen, and don't support genocide. Bye!